The auctioneer's gavel cracked against the wooden podium like a gunshot, and Beatrice Brennan felt her stomach drop as she stood on the raised platform in the sweltering heat of Wilcox, Arizona, watching the faces of strange men stare up at her with hungry eyes. June of 1883 had brought drought to the territory, but it had also brought something far worse to her doorstep. Her father's gambling debts, accumulated over years of whiskey-soaked poker games in saloons from Tucson to Tombstone, had finally come due, and the creditors had decided that his only daughter would settle the account. "Gentlemen, we'll start the bidding at $500, the auctioneer announced, his voice carrying across the dusty street where a crowd had gathered outside the Silver Spur Saloon. Beatrice's hands trembled as she clasped them together, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity even as her entire world crumbled around her. Her father stood off to the side, unable to meet her gaze, his weathered face a mask of shame and regret. The man had gambled away their ranch, their livestock, and now he was gambling away her future to pay off Dutch Henderson, a ruthless loan shark who controlled half the territory's underground dealings. 500, called out a portly merchant she recognized from the general store, and bile rose in her throat. 600, shouted another voice, this one belonging to a silver mine owner with a reputation for working his employees until they collapsed. Beatrice closed her eyes, willing herself not to cry, not to give these vultures the satisfaction of seeing her break. She was 22 years old, had spent her entire life working alongside her father on their cattle ranch before he lost it all, and now she stood here like a prize heifer being sold to the highest bidder. The sun beat down mercilessly on her dark blonde hair, and sweat trickled down her spine beneath the simple blue calico dress she wore, one of only 3 dresses she still owned. 700, came a new voice, deeper and rougher than the others. 800, the mine owner countered immediately. The bidding continued to climb, and Beatrice felt increasingly lightheaded. She scanned the crowd, trying to identify who was bidding, but the sea of faces blurred together in the harsh afternoon light. Dutch Henderson stood near the front, his cold gray eyes fixed on her with an expression that made her skin crawl. He had made it clear that if the auction did not cover her father's $5,000 debt, he would find other ways to collect, and those ways would involve far more suffering than simply being sold off to become some man's indentured servant or unwilling wife. $1,000, the mine owner declared confidently, and the crowd murmured with appreciation at the sum. A long silence followed. The auctioneer raised his gavel. $1,000, going once, going twice, $5,000. The words cut through the air like thunder, and every head turned to locate the speaker. Beatrice's eyes flew open, searching desperately for whoever had just bid an astronomical sum, an amount that would not only cover her father's entire debt, but actually match it exactly. The crowd parted, and she saw him for the first time. A tall cowboy with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, broad shoulders that filled out his dusty work shirt, and eyes the color of whiskey that locked onto hers with startling intensity. He stood with the easy confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was doing, his worn leather chaps and spurs marking him as someone who spent his days in the saddle rather than behind a desk. The auctioneer's jaw had dropped open. "Did you say 5,000, mister?" "I did," the cowboy replied, his voice steady and sure. $5,000 cash money, which I believe settles the debt in full and ends this auction." Dutch Henderson stepped forward, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "Now hold on just a minute. The debt is 5,000, yes, but the girl goes to the highest bidder and the proceeds pay the debt. I'm owed that money, not him." The cowboy's expression did not change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "The debt is $5,000. I'm paying $5,000. The debt is settled and Miss Brennan walks away free. That's the deal." "That ain't how this works," Dutch growled, and several of his men moved closer, hands hovering near their weapons. "It's exactly how this works," the cowboy said calmly. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a thick bundle of bills, holding it up for everyone to see. $5,000 in United States currency. You get your money, the debt is cleared, and the lady goes free. Unless you want to admit in front of all these witnesses that this was never about collecting a debt and always about selling a woman against her will, which last I checked is illegal even in Arizona territory. The crowd had gone completely silent. Beatrice held her breath, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She had no idea who this man was or why he was doing this, but he had just offered her something she had not dared to hope for: freedom. Dutch's face had turned an ugly shade of red. "Who the hell are you anyway?" "Name's Marcus Vance," the cowboy replied. "I run cattle up near the Chiricahua Mountains, and I'm a man who pays his debts and expects others to do the same honorably. So what's it going to be, Henderson? You want your money, or you want to start trouble in front of the territorial marshal?" He nodded toward a stern-faced man wearing a badge who had been watching the proceedings with increasing disapproval. Dutch's hand moved away from his gun. He snatched the money from Marcus's grasp and counted it quickly, his fingers moving with practiced speed. When he finished, he shoved the bills into his coat pocket and turned to Beatrice's father with a sneer. "Your debt is paid, Brennan. But if I ever see you at another card table in this territory, I'll make sure it's the last hand you ever play." Beatrice's father nodded weakly, looking like he might be sick. Dutch and his men disappeared into the saloon, and the crowd began to disperse, though many lingered to see what would happen next. The auctioneer cleared his throat awkwardly and stepped down from the platform, muttering something about needing a drink. Marcus approached the platform, and Beatrice found herself staring down at him, still trying to process what had just happened. Up close, she could see that he was probably in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and small scars on his hands that spoke of hard work and harder living. His eyes, though, held a kindness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "Miss Brennan," he said quietly, extending his hand to help her down from the platform. "You're free to go wherever you please. The debt is settled and you don't owe me a thing." She took his hand automatically, her legs shaking as she stepped down. "I don't understand. Why would you do this? $5,000 is a fortune." "Because what was happening here wasn't right," Marcus said simply. "A woman shouldn't be sold like property to pay for her father's mistakes. And I've got the money, so I figured I'd put it to good use." Beatrice's father stumbled forward, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I just thought I could win it all back. I thought—" "Stop," Beatrice said, her voice harder than she had ever heard it. She had loved her father once, had worked herself to exhaustion trying to help him save the ranch, but he had thrown it all away for the thrill of cards and whiskey. "Just stop, Pa. I can't listen to your excuses anymore." Her father's face crumpled, but he nodded and turned away, shuffling off down the street like a broken man. Beatrice watched him go and felt nothing but a hollow emptiness where her love for him had once resided. "You got somewhere to stay?" Marcus asked gently. "Family, friends?" Beatrice shook her head. "The ranch was foreclosed on last month. Everything we owned was sold off. I've been sleeping in the back room of the church, doing laundry and mending for folks to earn my meals." She looked up at him, confusion and gratitude warring in her chest. "Mr. Vance, I truly don't understand why you did this. Nobody just gives away $5,000 expecting nothing in return." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting across the dusty street before returning to her face. "My mother was sold off to pay her family's debts when she was about your age. This was back in Missouri before the war. Man who bought her wasn't kind. My father eventually helped her escape, and they made their way west, started over. She died 5 years ago, but before she passed, she made me promise that if I ever had the means and the opportunity to help a woman in a similar situation, I would. So when I rode into town this morning and heard what was happening, I knew what I had to do." Beatrice felt tears welling up in her eyes, and this time she did not fight them. "Your mother must have been an incredible woman." "She was," Marcus agreed, a sad smile touching his lips. "Strongest person I ever knew. Look, Miss Brennan, I meant what I said. You're free to go wherever you want, do whatever you want. But if you need work and a safe place to stay for a while until you figure things out, I could use help at my ranch. I've got a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who's been with me for 3 years. She's getting on in years and could use an extra pair of hands. The pay is fair, you'd have your own room, and I give you my word that you'd be treated with respect." Beatrice studied his face, searching for any hint of deception or ulterior motive, but all she saw was honest sincerity. She had no money, no prospects, and no family she could turn to. The idea of working at his ranch was certainly better than continuing to scrape by doing other people's laundry in Wilcox, and something in her gut told her that Marcus Vance was a man of his word. "I accept," she said quietly. "And thank you, Mr. Vance. I'll work hard, I promise you that." "I don't doubt it," Marcus replied. "And please call me Marcus. We don't stand much on formality at the ranch." He glanced up at the sun, which had begun its descent toward the western horizon. "We should get moving if we want to make it back before dark. It's about a 3-hour ride. Do you have belongings you need to collect?" "Just a small bag at the church," Beatrice said. "It won't take but a minute." They walked together through the streets of Wilcox, and Beatrice was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. News of the auction and Marcus's dramatic intervention would be the talk of the town for weeks, she knew, but she found she did not care. Let them talk. She was free, and that was all that mattered. The church was a small adobe building at the edge of town, and Father Miguel greeted them at the door with a warm smile. "Miss Beatrice, I heard what happened. I'm so glad you're safe." "Thank you for all your kindness, Father," Beatrice said, squeezing the elderly priest's hand. "I'll never forget it." She retrieved her worn canvas bag, which contained a change of clothes, a hairbrush that had been her mother's, and a small wooden cross her grandmother had given her before she died. It was not much, but it was all she had left of her old life. When she emerged from the church, Marcus was waiting with 2 horses, a magnificent black stallion and a gentler-looking bay mare. "This is Sage," Marcus said, patting the mare's neck. "She's got a sweet temperament and she'll treat you right." Beatrice had grown up around horses and swung herself into the saddle with practiced ease, though her dress made it somewhat awkward. Marcus noticed and said nothing, simply mounting his own horse and leading the way out of town. They rode in comfortable silence for the first hour, the landscape around them shifting from the dusty streets of Wilcox to open rangeland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear cactus. The Kairikahua Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks purple against the darkening sky. Beatrice found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks, the rhythm of the horse beneath her and the vast openness of the land soothing her frayed nerves. "Tell me about your ranch," she said finally, breaking the silence. Marcus glanced over at her, and she saw a hint of pride in his expression. "It's called the V-Bar M, About 2,000 acres of good grazing land, with a creek that runs year-round even in drought. I've got around 500 head of cattle right now, mostly longhorns but some Herefords I'm trying to crossbreed for better meat quality. There's me, Mrs. Chen, and 4 ranch hands who work the property. It's not fancy, but it's honest work and good land. How did you come to own it? Beatrice asked, genuinely curious. My father and I drove cattle up from Texas about 10 years ago, back in '73, Marcus explained. We were planning to start the ranch together, but he was killed in a riding accident before we could finish building the house. So I finished it myself, worked every hour of daylight for 2 years to get the place running. It's been profitable the last 5 years, enough that I've been able to save up a good amount. He paused, then added quietly, the money I spent today was my savings, everything I've put aside. But it was worth it. Beatrice felt her throat tighten. You spent your entire savings on me, Marcus. I don't know what to say. How will you manage? I'll manage just fine, Marcus assured her. The ranch turns a profit every year and I live simple. I'll build the savings back up. Like I said, it was the right thing to do, and I don't regret it for a second. They rode on as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Beatrice found herself stealing glances at Marcus, trying to understand this man who had appeared out of nowhere and changed her life completely. He rode with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than out of it, and there was a quiet strength about him that made her feel safe for the first time in months. As twilight deepened into dusk, they crested a rise and Marcus pointed ahead. There it is, home. Beatrice looked down into a valley where a cluster of buildings sat nestled against the base of a foothill. The main house was a sturdy adobe structure with a covered porch, and she could see a barn, a bunkhouse, and several corrals in the fading light. Smoke rose from the chimney, and warm light glowed in the windows, creating a scene so welcoming that Beatrice felt her eyes sting with unexpected emotion. They rode down into the yard, and a small, elderly Chinese woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her weathered face broke into a smile when she saw Marcus. "You are late," she scolded in accented English. "Dinner is getting cold." "Sorry, Mrs. Chen," Marcus said with a grin, dismounting. "Had some business in town that took longer than expected." He helped Beatrice down from her horse and made the introductions. "This is Miss Beatrice Brennan. She's going to be helping you around the house if that's all right with you." Mrs. Chen's sharp eyes assessed Beatrice from head to toe, and then she nodded approvingly. "You look strong. Can you cook?" "Yes, madam," Beatrice replied. "And clean, mend, tend a garden, preserve food, and handle livestock." "Good," Mrs. Chen said with satisfaction. "Come, I will show you your room and then we eat. Marcus, you take care of the horses." "Yes, madam," Marcus said obediently, and Beatrice caught the affectionate smile he directed at the older woman's back. The house was simple but comfortable, with whitewashed walls and sturdy furniture that looked handmade. Mrs. Chen led Beatrice down a short hallway and opened a door to reveal a small but clean room with a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "This is yours," Mrs. Chen said. "Wash basin there, clean water in the pitcher. Dinner in 10 minutes, so you come quick." "Thank you," Beatrice said sincerely. "I appreciate your kindness." Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Marcus is good man. If he brought you here, you must need help. We help each other on this ranch. That is how we survive." Left alone, Beatrice set her bag on the bed and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening landscape. She could hardly believe that just this morning she had been facing a nightmare, and now she stood in a comfortable room in a safe place, with work and dignity and hope for the future. It felt like a dream, and part of her was afraid she would wake up back on that auction platform. She washed her face and hands quickly, pinned her hair back more neatly, and made her way to the kitchen, following the delicious smells of roasted meat and fresh bread. The kitchen was large and well-equipped, with a big wooden table that could seat 8 people. Marcus was already seated, his hair damp from a quick wash, and Mrs. Chen was setting out platters of food. "Sit, sit," Mrs. Chen instructed, and Beatrice took a seat across from Marcus. The meal was simple but delicious. Roasted chicken, potatoes, beans, and corn bread with butter. Beatrice realized she had not eaten since the previous evening and had to force herself to eat slowly rather than wolfing down the food. "The hands eat in the bunkhouse," Marcus explained between bites. "But Mrs. Chen insists I eat in the house so I don't forget my manners entirely." "You need civilization," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Otherwise you become like wild animal." Marcus's eyes danced with amusement. She's probably right. As they ate, Marcus explained the routine of the ranch. Beatrice would help Mrs. Chen with household tasks, cooking for everyone, maintaining the vegetable garden, and handling the chickens and dairy cow. There were also accounts to be kept, supplies to be ordered from town, and general maintenance of the house and yard. In return, she would receive a salary of $20 a month, room and board, and 1 day off each week. "It's honest work," Marcus concluded. "And you'll be treated as part of the household, not as a servant. Mrs. Chen and I eat together and you'll join us. We share the work and the rewards." Beatrice nodded, almost overwhelmed by his fairness. $20 a month was more than generous for household work, and the respectful treatment was something she had not even dared to hope for. After dinner, exhaustion caught up with her and Mrs. Chen shooed her off to bed despite her protests that she should help clean up. "You start work tomorrow," the older woman said firmly. "Tonight you rest." Beatrice retreated to her room, changed into her nightgown, and climbed into the bed, which was softer and more comfortable than anything she had slept on in months. She expected to lie awake, her mind spinning with everything that had happened, but instead she fell asleep almost immediately, her body finally releasing the tension it had held for so long. She woke before dawn, a lifetime of ranch work having trained her to rise early. Dressing quickly in her work dress, she made her way to the kitchen and found Mrs. Chen already up, stoking the fire in the stove. "You are early riser," Mrs. Chen observed approvingly. "Good. We start breakfast. Marcus and the hands eat at sunrise." Working alongside Mrs. Chen, Beatrice helped prepare a massive breakfast of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy. The ranch hands came in just as the sun broke over the horizon, a quartet of weather-beaten men who eyed Beatrice with curiosity but tipped their hats politely when Marcus introduced her. They ate quickly and efficiently, thanking Mrs. Chen before heading out to their day's work. Marcus lingered after the others had gone. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Beatrice admitted. "Thank you again, Marcus, for everything." "You don't need to keep thanking me," he said gently. "You're part of the ranch now. We all pull our weight and look out for each other." He hesitated, then added, "If you need anything or if you have any problems, you come find me." "Understood." "Understood," Beatrice agreed. He nodded and headed out, and Beatrice watched through the window as he strode across the yard to the barn, his long legs covering the ground with easy strides. Mrs. Chen noticed her watching and made a small sound that might have been amusement. "He is good man," she said again, "but lonely. Too much time with cows, not enough with people." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm and quickly turned her attention to cleaning up the breakfast dishes. The days developed into a comfortable routine. Beatrice rose early, helped prepare breakfast, spent her mornings working in the garden or tending the chickens, prepared the midday meal, and spent her afternoons on various household tasks. Mending, preserving food, making soap, cleaning, and helping Mrs. Chen with whatever needed doing. The work was hard but satisfying, and she fell into bed each night pleasantly tired rather than exhausted and hopeless. Marcus kept his distance, polite and friendly, but not overly familiar. Beatrice appreciated his respect for her space and her need to adjust to her new circumstances. Still, she found herself watching for him throughout the day, noticing the way he interacted with the ranch hands with firm but fair authority, the gentle way he handled the horses, the pride he took in showing her the improvements he had made to the property. 3 weeks after her arrival, Marcus asked if she would like to ride out with him to check on the cattle in the north pasture. "It's beautiful country up there," he said, "and you look like you could use a break from housework." Beatrice agreed eagerly, and they set out on a clear morning with the sky impossibly blue overhead. Marcus led her through rolling grassland into the foothills, pointing out landmarks and explaining his plans for expanding the herd. His passion for the land was evident in every word, and Beatrice found herself caught up in his enthusiasm. They stopped at a high point that overlooked the entire valley, and Marcus dismounted to let the horses rest and graze. Beatrice joined him, and they sat on a fallen log, looking out over the vast expanse of territory spreading before them. "It's incredible," Beatrice said softly. "I grew up on a ranch, but it was nothing like this. This is wild and beautiful and free." "That's why I love it," Marcus agreed. "Out here, a man can build something that matters, something that will last, and he can do it on his own terms with his own hands." He glanced at her. "How are you settling in?" "Truly, better than I could have hoped," Beatrice said honestly. "Mrs. Chen is wonderful, the work is good, and I feel safe for the first time in a very long while." She paused, gathering her courage. "Marcus, I've been wanting to ask you something. That day in Wilcox, when you bid on me, did you know who I was? Had you seen me before?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I had seen you," he admitted. "About 6 months ago, I was in town buying supplies, and I saw you outside the general store. You were loading bags of feed into a wagon, working hard, and you smiled at something your father said. It was the most beautiful smile I had ever seen, and I found myself thinking about you for weeks afterward. But I never had the courage to approach you, and then the next time I came to town, I heard that your father had lost the ranch and you were living at the church." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. "When I heard about the auction, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let you be sold off to someone who would hurt you." Beatrice felt her heart hammering in her chest. "You spent your life savings on someone you had only seen once." "I spent my life savings doing what was right," Marcus corrected gently. "And if I'm being completely honest, yes, the fact that it was you made the decision easier, but I would have done it for any woman in that situation. I just happened to be very glad it was you." She did not know what to say to that. Part of her wanted to protest, to tell him he was foolish for throwing away so much money, but another part of her, a part that was growing stronger every day, was deeply moved by his actions and his words. "You're not like any man I've ever known," she said finally. "I'll take that as a compliment," Marcus replied with a slight smile. "Come on, we should check on the herd and then head back. Mrs. Chen will have my hide if we miss the midday meal." As they rode back to the ranch, Beatrice found her mind spinning. She had been so focused on survival, on getting through each day, that she had not allowed herself to think about the future beyond the immediate. But now, riding beside Marcus through this beautiful wild country, she began to imagine possibilities she had not dared to consider before. Over the following weeks, Beatrice and Marcus spent more time together. He began teaching her the business side of ranching, showing her how he kept the accounts and planned for market fluctuations. She discovered she had a head for numbers and enjoyed the challenge of finding ways to make the operation more efficient. They would sit together in the evening after dinner, going over ledgers while Mrs. Chen knitted in the corner, and Beatrice felt a contentment she had never known. She also began to notice small things about Marcus that made her heart skip. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the gentle patience he showed when breaking a young horse, the deep rumble of his laugh when one of the ranch hands told a joke, the calluses on his hands from years of hard work, the way he always made sure everyone else ate before taking food for himself. One evening in late July, a violent thunderstorm rolled across the valley. Wind howled around the house, and rain hammered against the windows. Beatrice was helping Mrs. Chen prepare supper when Marcus burst through the door, soaked to the skin. "Lightning struck near the south pasture," he said urgently. "Started a small fire, but the rain is helping contain it. I need to ride out with the boys to make sure none of the cattle are injured or trapped. Mrs. Chen, can you prepare some coffee and food we can take with us? It's going to be a long night." Both women sprang into action. While Mrs. Chen prepared thermoses of hot coffee and wrapped sandwiches, Beatrice gathered blankets, medical supplies in case anyone was hurt, and extra rope and tools. Marcus watched her work with approval. "You think like a rancher," he observed. "I was raised as one," Beatrice reminded him, "before my father ruined everything." She hesitated, then added, "Be careful out there. Lightning storms are dangerous." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes at her concern. "I will," he promised. "Don't wait up. This could take most of the night." But Beatrice did wait up, sitting in the kitchen long after Mrs. Chen had gone to bed, listening to the storm rage outside and worrying about Marcus and the hands out in the darkness. It was nearly 3 in the morning when she finally heard horses in the yard and the sound of men's voices. She rushed to the door and opened it to find Marcus trudging up the steps, muddy and exhausted but unharmed. "Is everyone all right?" she asked immediately. "Everyone's fine," Marcus assured her. "We lost about 20 head that panicked and fell into a ravine, and we'll need to repair some fence, but it could have been much worse." "What are you doing up?" "I was worried," Beatrice admitted before she could stop herself. Marcus's expression softened. He reached out and gently touched her cheek with the back of his hand, a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. "I'm all right, Bea. Takes more than a little storm to do me in." It was the first time he had called her by the shortened version of her name, and she found she liked the way it sounded in his deep voice. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, and Beatrice felt the air between them crackle with something that had nothing to do with the lightning storm. Marcus stepped back, breaking the moment. "I should clean up and get some sleep. Long day ahead tomorrow." "Of course," Beatrice said quickly. "Good night, Marcus." "Good night, Bea." She went to bed with her heart racing, finally admitting to herself what had been growing for weeks. She was falling in love with Marcus Vance. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. She had been hurt so badly by her father's betrayal, had lost everything she had ever known, and the idea of trusting someone again, of giving her heart to another person, felt impossibly risky. But Marcus was not like other men. He had proven his character over and over, through his actions and his words, and Beatrice found herself wanting to take the risk despite her fears. But did Marcus feel the same way? He was kind to her, respectful, seemed to enjoy her company, but was that simply because he was a good man who treated everyone well? Or was there something more? Beatrice could not be sure, and she was afraid to hope too much only to be disappointed. August arrived with blistering heat. One afternoon, Marcus announced that he needed to take the wagon into Wilcox to pick up supplies and asked if Beatrice would like to come along. It would be her first trip back to town since the day of the auction, and she felt nervous about facing the people who had witnessed her humiliation. "I understand if you would rather not go," Marcus said when he noticed her hesitation. "I can ask Mrs. Chen instead." "No," Beatrice said, straightening her shoulders. "I'll come. I can't hide from the world forever, and I won't give those gossips the satisfaction of thinking they've beaten me." Marcus's eyes gleamed with approval. "That's the spirit." The ride to Wilcox was pleasant, with Marcus keeping up a steady stream of conversation that helped ease Beatrice's anxiety. When they arrived in town, she held her head high and refused to look away when people stared. Marcus stayed close to her side, a reassuring presence that gave her strength. They were at the general store selecting supplies when a familiar voice made Beatrice's blood run cold. Well, if it isn't the ranch girl and her knight in shining armor." She turned to see Dutch Henderson leaning against the counter, a cruel smile on his face. He had clearly been drinking, and his eyes were bloodshot and mean. "Henderson," Marcus said evenly, "we don't want any trouble." "No trouble," Dutch said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Just making conversation. Though I have to say, Vance, you got yourself a raw deal. $5,000 for damaged goods. Her old man might have kept her chastity intact, but she's still a Brennan, and everyone knows that family is cursed with bad luck and worse judgment." Beatrice felt rage boil up inside her. Before Marcus could respond, she stepped forward and looked Dutch directly in the eye. "The only bad judgment I ever showed was not standing up to men like you sooner. My father made terrible choices, but I am not my father, and I will not be defined by his mistakes. As for being damaged goods, any man who measures a woman's worth that way is not worth knowing. So you can take your opinions and your cruelty and choke on them for all I care." The store had gone completely silent. Dutch's face turned purple with anger, and his hand moved toward his gun, but Marcus was faster. He stepped between Dutch and Beatrice, his own hand resting casually on his weapon. "You draw that gun, and I'll drop you where you stand," Marcus said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "Bea is under my protection, and any insult to her is an insult to me. You got your money, Henderson. Our business is concluded. Walk away." For a tense moment, it seemed like Dutch might actually draw, but then the marshal appeared in the doorway of the store, his hand on his own weapon. "Problem here, gentlemen?" the marshal asked mildly. Dutch seemed to deflate. He spat on the floor and stalked out of the store, shoving past the marshal. The tension in the room eased immediately, and the other customers went back to their business, though Beatrice could feel their curious stares. "Thank you," she said quietly to Marcus. "You did not need my help," Marcus replied with a hint of pride. "You handled him just fine on your own, but I was not about to let him threaten you." They finished their shopping quickly and loaded the supplies into the wagon. As they prepared to leave town, Marcus surprised her by driving past the turnoff for the ranch and heading instead toward a small rise overlooking the valley. "Where are we going?" Beatrice asked. "There's something I want to show you," Marcus said. He stopped the wagon at the top of the rise, where a large oak tree provided shade and the view stretched for miles in every direction. Marcus helped Beatrice down and led her to a spot beneath the tree. "This is my favorite place in the whole territory," he said. "I come here when I need to think or when I want to remind myself why I work so hard. The land, the sky, the freedom, it's all right here." Beatrice looked out at the view and understood immediately. "It's perfect." "Bea," Marcus said, and there was something in his voice that made her turn to face him. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything, all right?" Her heart began to pound. "All right." Marcus took a deep breath. "When I saw you on that auction block, something inside me just broke. The idea of you being sold, of someone hurting you or using you, it was unbearable. And yes, part of that was because of my mother, because of the promise I made to her. But part of it was also because I had thought about you every day since I saw you outside that general store. I told myself I was being foolish, that you could never be interested in a simple cattleman like me, but I could not stop thinking about you. He paused, searching her face. These past 2 months, getting to know you, working alongside you, seeing your strength and your courage and your kindness, I've fallen completely in love with you. And I know you might not feel the same way, and I know you have every reason to be wary of men after what your father and Henderson put you through, but I had to tell you. I love you, Beatrice Brennan, and if you'll have me, I would be honored to make you my wife. Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. Marcus, I've been so afraid to hope for this. I've been falling in love with you too, but I was scared that I was just imagining things, that you were only being kind because that's who you are. I am being kind because of who you are, Marcus said, stepping closer and gently wiping away her tears with his thumbs. You're the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known. You faced down Dutch Henderson today without flinching. You work harder than anyone I've ever seen. You're smart and funny and beautiful, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you'll let me. Yes, Beatrice said, laughing through her tears. Yes, Marcus, I will marry you. I love you so much. Marcus's face lit up with a joy so pure it made Beatrice's heart ache. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, slow and sweet and full of promise. Beatrice melted into him, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him back with all the love and hope and happiness that filled her heart. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard and grinning like fools. I want to do this right, Marcus said. A proper engagement, a proper wedding, everything you deserve. I don't need anything fancy, Beatrice assured him. I just need you. You'll have me, Marcus promised. For the rest of our lives, you'll have me. They stayed under the oak tree for a while longer, talking about their future and making plans. Marcus wanted to wait a few months before the wedding, to give Beatrice time to be certain and to allow them to prepare properly. Beatrice agreed, though privately she thought she could marry him tomorrow and be perfectly happy. When they returned to the ranch, Mrs. Chen took one look at their faces and broke into a wide smile. Finally, she said with satisfaction. I was wondering how long it would take you foolish young people to figure it out. Marcus laughed. You knew. Of course I knew, Mrs. Chen said, rolling her eyes. I have eyes. You both stare at each other when you think the other is not looking. It was very obvious. They told her about the engagement, and Mrs. Chen immediately began planning, talking about what food would be served at the wedding and what flowers would be in season. Her excitement was contagious, and Beatrice felt a warm glow of happiness settle over her. The next few months were a whirlwind of preparation and joy. Beatrice and Marcus spent as much time together as their work allowed, stealing kisses in the barn and taking long evening rides through the countryside. Marcus formally asked her to marry him with a simple gold ring he had ordered from a jeweler in Tucson, and Beatrice wore it with pride. They decided to marry in October, when the worst of the summer heat had passed, but before the winter cold set in. The wedding would be held at the ranch, with Father Miguel presiding and the entire community invited. Beatrice made her own wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Chen helped her sew. As the wedding day approached, Beatrice found herself thinking about her father. She had not seen or heard from him since the day of the auction, and part of her wondered if she should reach out, to at least let him know about the wedding. But when she mentioned it to Marcus, he was gentle but firm. That's your decision, Bea, he said. "But remember that you don't owe him anything. He made his choices and they hurt you terribly. If you want to invite him, I'll support you, but if you don't, that's all right too." In the end, Beatrice decided not to reach out. Her father had gambled away her future without a second thought, and she had built a new life without him. She wished him no ill will, but she did not need his presence at her wedding to make the day complete. October 15th dawned clear and beautiful, with a crisp coolness in the air that felt like a blessing after the long, hot summer. Beatrice woke early, her stomach fluttering with nervous excitement. Mrs. Chen helped her dress and did her hair, weaving wildflowers into the braids. "You are beautiful bride," Mrs. Chen said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Marcus is very lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Beatrice replied, squeezing the older woman's hand. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Chen. You've been like family to me." "You are family," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "And after today, it will be official." The ceremony was held in the yard of the ranch, beneath the open sky with the mountains as a backdrop. Chairs had been set up for the guests, and the ranch hands had built an arbor decorated with flowers and ribbons. As Beatrice walked toward Marcus, who stood waiting for her with Father Miguel, she felt like her heart might burst with happiness. Marcus looked impossibly handsome in a new suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his eyes locked on her with such love that Beatrice felt tears prick at her eyes. When she reached him, he took her hand and smiled. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered. Father Miguel led them through the traditional vows, and when Marcus slipped the wedding band onto Beatrice's finger and she did the same for him, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she was meant to be with this man, building a life together on this wild, beautiful land. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Father Miguel said with a warm smile. "You may kiss your bride." Marcus pulled Beatrice into his arms and kissed her soundly, to the cheers and applause of their guests. When they broke apart, both of them were laughing, and Beatrice thought she had never been so happy in her entire life. The celebration that followed was joyous and lively. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with the food, and someone had brought a fiddle, filling the air with music. Beatrice danced with Marcus, with the ranch hands, with Father Miguel, and even with the marshal who had come to pay his respects. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, she stood with Marcus's arm around her waist and looked at the people who had become her new family, her new community. "Happy," Marcus murmured into her hair. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Beatrice replied. "Thank you for saving me, Marcus. Thank you for loving me." "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy with more heart than sense," Marcus said with a laugh. "I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." "I could never regret you," Beatrice said, turning to kiss him again. That night, after the guests had left and Mrs. Chen had tactfully retired to her room, Marcus carried Beatrice over the threshold of their bedroom. He set her down gently and looked at her with such tenderness that Beatrice felt her breath catch. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," Beatrice replied. "Now and always." They came together with a passion born of months of restrained desire and deep emotional connection. Marcus was gentle and patient, and Beatrice gave herself to him completely, trusting him with her body as she had already trusted him with her heart. It was beautiful and profound, and when they finally lay tangled together in the darkness, Beatrice knew that this was the life she was meant to live. The years that followed were filled with hard work, joy, and deep love. Beatrice proved herself to be not just a capable partner, but an invaluable asset to the ranch. Her head for numbers helped them secure better prices for their cattle, and her ideas for diversifying their income with chickens and a dairy operation brought in steady additional revenue. In the spring of 1885, Beatrice gave birth to their first child, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined spirit. They named him Matthew, and Marcus was completely besotted with his son, spending every spare moment teaching him about the ranch and the land. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, named Rose for the wildflowers that had adorned Beatrice's wedding day. She had her mother's blonde hair and her father's whiskey-colored eyes, and she was fearless from the moment she could walk. Mrs. Chen doted on the children shamelessly, and the ranch hands became a collection of doting uncles who taught Matthew to rope and Rose to ride almost before they could read. The V-Bar-M prospered under Marcus and Beatrice's stewardship, growing to 3,000 acres and a herd of over 1,000 head. In 1889, they received word that Beatrice's father had died in a boarding house in Tombstone, his liver finally giving out from years of drinking. Beatrice felt sadness, but also a sense of closure. She had built a good life despite his failures, and she chose to remember the father he had been when she was young, before the gambling and the drink had destroyed him. One evening in the late summer of 1890, Beatrice and Marcus sat on the porch, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains. Marcus reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "You ever think about that day in Wilcox?" he asked. "Sometimes," Beatrice admitted, "but not with sadness anymore. That day led me here to you, to this life, and I wouldn't change a single thing." "Not even the parts that hurt?" Marcus asked gently. "Not even those," Beatrice said firmly. "Because they taught me how to recognize the good when it came along. They taught me that strength is not about never falling, but about getting back up and building something better from the ruins. And they brought me to you." Marcus lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I saw you loading feed outside that general store, and I knew my life was going to change. I just didn't know how much." "Changed for the better, I hope," Beatrice teased. "Changed for the better beyond my wildest dreams," Marcus confirmed. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, listening to the sound of their children's laughter and feeling the steady beat of her husband's heart. In 1892, they welcomed another son, named James, who was the spitting image of his father and just as stubborn. The ranch continued to thrive, and Marcus began mentoring some of the younger ranchers in the area, sharing what he had learned and helping them avoid the pitfalls that could destroy a cattle operation. Beatrice started a small school on the ranch, teaching not just her own children but also the children of the ranch hands and neighboring families. She discovered she loved teaching and was good at it, and seeing the children learn and grow gave her tremendous satisfaction. Mrs. Chen remained with them until her death in 1895, passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. Beatrice mourned her deeply, having come to love the older woman as the mother she had lost too young. They buried her on a hillside overlooking the ranch she had helped build, and Beatrice made sure fresh flowers were placed on her grave every week. As the century drew to a close, Marcus and Beatrice celebrated 15 years of marriage. Their children were growing strong and capable. Matthew at 14 was already working the cattle alongside his father. Rose at 12 could outride most of the ranch hands, and James at 7 showed signs of having his mother's head for business. One night as they prepared for bed, Marcus pulled Beatrice into his arms and held her close. "You know what I'm most proud of?" he asked. "The ranch," Beatrice guessed. "No," Marcus said. "I'm most proud of us. Of what we built together, not just in terms of land and cattle, but in terms of family and love and legacy. You were auctioned off like property B, but you became the most important person in my world. You're my partner, my love, my best friend, and the best mother our children could have asked for. That's what I'm proud of." Beatrice felt tears sting her eyes. Even after all these years, Marcus could still move her to tears with his words. "I love you so much, Marcus Vance. You gave me back my freedom and then convinced me to freely give you my heart. It's the best decision I ever made." "Second best," Marcus corrected with a smile. "The best decision you ever made was agreeing to help Mrs. Chen with the housework all those years ago." Beatrice laughed and swatted his arm playfully. "You're impossible." "I'm yours," Marcus said simply and kissed her. The years continued to roll by, bringing both challenges and triumphs. Droughts came and were weathered. Market fluctuations threatened their livelihood, but were overcome through careful planning and diversification. The children grew into capable adults. Matthew took over more and more of the ranch operations. Rose married a neighboring rancher and started her own spread. And James went to college in California to study business before returning to help modernize the V-Bar MTK's operations. In 1910, Marcus and Beatrice celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a huge party attended by what seemed like half the territory. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, and as Beatrice looked around at the family they had built and the community they were part of, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, as they lay in bed together, Marcus traced patterns on her hand with his fingers, a gesture he had done thousands of times over their years together. "What are you thinking about?" Beatrice asked. "I'm thinking about a young man who rode into Wilcox one day and saw the woman he loved standing on an auction block," Marcus said quietly. "I'm thinking about how scared I was that I wouldn't be able to save her, and how grateful I am that I had the means to do it. And I'm thinking about how that one decision, that one moment, led to all of this." He gestured around the room, but Beatrice knew he meant more than just the physical space. He meant their life, their family, their love. "I used to think that day was the worst day of my life," Beatrice said. "But now I understand that it was actually the beginning of the best part of my life. You saw me when I was at my lowest and you lifted me up. You gave me freedom, and then you gave me something even more precious, a reason to freely choose to stay. I chose you, Marcus, every day for 25 years, and I would choose you again in a heartbeat." "And I choose you," Marcus said, pulling her close. "Always and forever, Bea, always and forever." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had done for a quarter of a century, secure in their love and the life they had built together. The sun rose over the Arizona territory, casting golden light across the V-Bar ranch, where a woman who had once been auctioned off like property now lived as the beloved matriarch of a thriving family and a prosperous ranch. The cowboy who had outbid everyone to set her free had instead won her heart, and together they had built something far more valuable than money could ever buy. A love that would last for all their days and a legacy that would endure for generations to come.